Well, I'm really happy to be here with my strange bedfellows. Duncan Campbell, who's a new energy visionary from Boulder, Colorado, involved with the municipalization of the electricity there. Also an attorney. Deborah Davis, who almost needs no introduction. She runs Environmental Health Trust and has been a leading environmental scientist for a long time, committed to improving life. Jim Turner, who you heard just now, who chairs Citizens for Health and National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy, that will be publishing the paper that Dr. Sheckley, Tim Sheckley on the end, will be finishing up in the next couple weeks. So we really have a powerhouse team here, and the subject of this panel is focused on the needs, the unmet needs for safer telecommunications, and what structurally can be done in our society. So I'd like to begin with Duncan, who's been patiently waiting and listening to all of these presentations for several days. Duncan, if you could give us a big picture of structurally, where we're at and where we need to move to, so that we can assure that the values that we want to see at the heart of our society are there.
Thank you, Camilla. I just want to begin by saying what a real joy it's been to participate in this IBE conference the last 3 days, and how deeply honored I feel at being invited here. I see immediately with everything I've heard and the people that I've met personally that we all do share a major heart connection and a spiritual connection as well as an intellectual connection. Helmut's aha moment that he had back in Libya, these more than 25 years ago, was deeply moving to me. I've had very much similar experiences in my life in the many countries that I've traveled with, and have always been struck by how over time much of the communication from our world to the rest of the world has been one-way communication, where we think with a certain kind of perhaps even unconscious hubris that we have the technology, we have the answers, we're going to go and cure river blindness and Ouagadougou, but failing to see all the great community lessons and life lessons that we can get by exposure to these other cultures. And I think in terms of communication, for it to be safer, one of the very first things is for it to be two-way, and for us to have a kind of humility about our engagement with the world and with the planet and with everything in the universe. I have a program that I was called to do starting about 2 decades ago called Living Dialogues. And it came out of a vision, you might call it colloquially, but actually it was kind of something that bloomed in my awareness. It was not a manufactured thought stream from my education or my background. It was as if there was a kind of communication welling up within me from the universe that wanted to be articulated. And it's what sometimes all of us call our vocation or our calling. There's a moment in all of our lives where we feel that we're being called to give the unique gift that each of us has that is always in service to a larger reality. It's not about personal advancement, it's not about greed, it's not about impersonal corporate bottom line or performance. It's about being with the entire universe at the very essence of who we are. And what I was shown, I want to just share with you as what's been my guiding articulation, you might say, for the last 20 years, is that the history of our species, we began in our indigenous lives, which I believe lives on in all of us, in our psychic and physical DNA, and is our birthright as human beings. We began in an environment that has been described by the anthropologist as participation mystique, in the fancy way, which simply means mystical participation. That we experienced ourselves as an integral part of a fully alive universe, alive in every regard, including consciousness, so that we knew how to communicate not only with plants and learn from them. Plant spirit medicine now is coming back, and with animals and their totemic and compassionate relationship with us, but also with the landscape itself. And that would include not only things like the physical landscape that is visible to us, but now the landscape that we are focusing in on at this conference, the invisible fields of energy, some of which are in harmony with nature, but many of which increasingly are not. And the ones that are not are coming from our technology. What I was shown was that in our indigenous world, there was an alive universe and we were in harmony with it, but then easy to understand, as in a life developmental cycle, we pushed away Father, Son, and Mother Earth, just like an adolescent pushes away Mom and Dad in order to individuate. And I refer to that, and it was shown to me as the modern mind, so that we kind of move from that womb of the being with the earth into this notion of having dominion over and to empower ourselves through our accelerating tool-making activity. Now, the word technology comes from the word techne, which in Greece means man-made. So when Aldo Prieto referred in his wonderful presentation on holistic architecture to our man-made structures being the source of imbalance increasingly and unhealthy and unsafe environments, I was really struck by that, because in his way of talking about holistic architecture, he very much linked it to the IBE vision and understanding that Helmut had originally with that aha experience that we need to reintegrate ourselves back into the natural world. And this goes back to the vision that came to me 20 years ago, where I was shown that the, we might say, intensified modern mind of the last 500 or 600 years had begun to outstrip, with its technology, the wisdom of the heart of knowing how to use this technology for the benefit of all of us and of the earth. And that just as there comes a time in our adolescent narcissism as human beings where we have to grow up and mature, I was shown that in the last 10 years of the 20th century and the first 10 years of the 21st century, we were going to start moving beyond this adolescent anthropocentric view, romancing and being romanced by our own man-made technology, into a kind of sacred marriage where we would reintegrate our respectful and deeply appreciative relationship with the earth itself and our own indigenous consciousness. And we would bring forward all of the innovation of our modern mind, but we would leave behind the hubris. And so, just as Camilla, I thought, said so beautifully this morning, that in order to move ahead with all of our action programs based on our shared knowledge and scientific research and exploring at the frontiers of science in the topics that we've all discussed together here, the big picture is that we need to change consciousness. Changing consciousness is the key to actually changing our world. And so even approaching our legislators, as Jim Turner has eloquently invited us to do, requires a shift internally, as every one of the speakers has said, that we start with our own experience and we shift, as Helmut did, into this larger relationship, something beyond ourselves, and integrated with rather than in this oppositional polarization. So what I've done on my program for 20 years of Living Dialogue is try to hold the space for that kind of encounter and for that kind of information so that this larger picture can reveal itself in dialogue rather than simply put forward information at the intellectual level. And so as we're approaching this topic here now, safer communications, I just wanted to start this first participation, since we're all going to go around the horn several times here with Camilla's moderation and facilitation, and say that for me, that larger vision that I feel really resonant with, that's expressed not only in the IBE principles, but in every person that I've met here, that's been such a deep pleasure, is why I feel inspired to add whatever I can, both in information and in energetic alliance with what's happening here. So I'll save my specific comments, for later, but I did want to begin with just setting the table of how I felt so invited and inspired by this gathering.